get access to the little Watchout badges and keychains. Okay, good. Details enough to go around. So yeah, welcome to this Global Taiwan Institute seminar on Taiwan Civil Defense. And if you're here, it means you recognize the importance of this issue and you're curious to understand how we can improve it. So it's a pleasure to see you all, and I encourage you all to chat with our panelists after this discussion and find ways to collaborate and stay involved. First, a little bit of housekeeping. If you're not familiar with the Global Taiwan Institute, we're a 501c3 think tank dedicated to insightful, cutting-edge, and inclusive research on policy issues regarding Taiwan and the world. GTI's mission is to enhance the relationship between Taiwan and other countries through policy research that promotes better public understanding about Taiwan and its people. You may know our Global Taiwan Brief. It comes out every 2 weeks on Taiwan issues, particularly related to Taiwan society. And there's also an annual symposium, which is our flagship event on US-Taiwan policy. That's coming up actually very soon on October 16th here in Washington. So we encourage you to go on our website, globaltaiwan.org, and register for that if you haven't done so already, because I think spots are going to fill up pretty soon. We also have frequent public seminars just like these. So for those who are watching on the live stream, I just want to let you know that if you want to ask questions for any of our panelists, please type them into your chat window on your YouTube feed, or you can email them directly to us at contact@globaltaiwan.org. Today, we also want to thank the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy for sponsoring this event and giving us the grant funding to fly our featured speaker, Kuo-chun Hong, all the way from Taiwan, and also for putting food in your bellies this lunchtime. My name is Ben Sando. I'm a research fellow here at the Global Taiwan Institute. I'm joined today by 4 thinkers in the field of civil defense. Each represents a different perspective. The Taiwanese civil defense groups themselves, the international NGOs to support this activism, Taiwan's government policies, and a view from the Ukraine and Baltic states' societal resilience efforts. They're going to outline opportunities and challenges in Taiwan's civil defense efforts beyond just the weekend groups that practice with paintball guns. First up is Kuo-chun Hong, who is the Chief Operating Officer and former Chief Editor of Watchout, an independent media outlet dedicated to promoting civil defense awareness. He's also the co-editor of the Civil Defense Guide and the Active Civil Defense Guide, 2 civil defense manuals published by Watchout. Watchout's mission is to raise public awareness and foster engagement in political processes to build a better Taiwan. We also thank Kuo-chun for his dedication to fly all the way from Taipei to be here today. So I'll hand it over to you, Kuo-chun.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much. And thanks, GDI, for inviting me to introduce what Watchout works on civil defense issues. And oh, yes, and this is my slides on Taiwan civil defense, the race for preparations. And what is Watchout and what we do is Watchout, Watchout is that we are an online media that focuses on China's influence in Taiwan. So, and what we're trying to do is we want to using the power of media to work as a bottom-up, because we are from civil societies, and to have a better leverage to change the policy by the governments and to have a big impact to the whole society on the political issues we want people to care about. And we established 11 years ago on the end of 2013. Because during back in 2013 is still under the KMT as a ruling party under my decisions. So the influence on China is getting bigger and bigger. So we started to think, if we want the public in Taiwan to start to understand, the relationship with China can be very dangerous, we started to work on how to raise awareness on to make people understand this could be a problem. So we start our first project on Congress watchdog. We want to make the Congress more transparent, because every bill, every budget, every resolution that is going to be related to China, we have to pass through the Congress. So this is kind of our first project, Watchout do. And then something happened in the March 2014. the Songpa movement. So yeah, so people started to notice that, oh, the influence on China is just too big. You cannot ignore that. And but later on, we find out that in about like 2016, 17, of course, we have to focus on kind of like media literacy workshops or telling people, teaching people how to debunk disinformations. So we also do a lot of fact check workshops. And also during like presidential election or local elections, we also have some like live when there's a live debating, we do a live checking. And yeah, so it's trying to change the disinformation environment in Taiwan. Later, we just find out, okay, just to focus on disinformation or media literacy, it's just the scope is too small. We have to look bigger, look at the bigger pictures. Because what we're facing is more like the hybrid war threats from China. So it's like kind of like we need to do this as a civil defense. It's not just media literacy, because China is using the power of the whole countries to attack us through this disinformation. So we start to work with Pumas, which is a legislator now. We have done a series of cognitive warfare online video course. There's like 10 episodes. You can find it on the internet. Sorry, it's all in Mandarin. And later on, we start to work on civil defense guide. Why? Because we start to find out Taiwan is not the only country that is confronting the hybrid war threats. Also, the country around Russia, those Baltic countries are also facing this kind of warfare. So we start to study what they do when they're facing this threat. And we find out that the Baltic countries like Sweden, Lithuania, Latvia, all their governments publish a civil defense guide for their citizens. Like, for example, the Swedes, I believe they give every household a physical copies of like civil defense guide. So we've done those research, and we as a media, so we ask our governments, like the Minister of Defense, hey, are you going to do that? Are you going to publish one? But they say, no, maybe some other times. And we ask for like internal affairs minister, and they say, no, it's not my business. So if they are not doing it, why don't we do it ourselves, since we have already done this research? So that is the reason why we started publish the first guide, the first civil defense guide in 2022. And okay, I only got 3 minutes left. Okay, so it's like our first guide. We published that just before the Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine. Yeah, and then I believe I don't. Okay, yeah, this is our first defense guide in early 2022, and then the Minister of Defense published their own version just after when we published our version. And of course, they published 2022 and 23. There's 2 versions. And also, we've been like interviewed by a lot of global media, foreign media, like NHK France 2, and other countries from around the world. And also, like, yes, and some local media and some documentary team. Okay, and we are also listed in the Reuters Institute Digital News Report 2023. Like say, Watchout and Independent Media Organization produced handbooks on how to spot disinformation in a crisis. Yeah, and what we have already done is like we sold more than 13 physical copies of the first guide, and yes, more than 20 media coverage, global and worldwide and domestic, and more than 1.5 million audience reaches on social media. And but there's something we want to do more is like, how can we impact more? So we started to do an online, kind of like online defense knowledge platform, and also like big online guide. So because we are good at making things easier to understand, civil defense is not a sexy story. It's a very difficult issue for people to understand. So we try to do it out of way. And thanks for the help from this guy, Sphere of America. Yeah, so we publish our second guide, Active Civil Defense Guide. And we made a series of like animations on what is civil defense about. And also like I just get a video and the comics on how to prepare for yourself during the war and how to assist in other civil defense knowledge, and also some articles and podcasts. And we also interview by a lot of foreign media, which is yes. Yeah, and overall, yes, we have a flavor guide and we have a QR code in the end of the slide. You can check it yourself. And there's more than 350,000 online download guide readers. And there's more than 4.5 million audience we reached. And if we will add audience from the guide from the ads, there's another 6 million audience reached. Okay, challenge opportunities, not enough time. So this is very important to have the strategic communication by civil society, but also for the government. I don't have the time for the details. Maybe the government who used to work in the government, they should answer that questions. And also the polarization in our public in Taiwan, because now it becomes the civil defense issue becomes all for certain party supporters and or for from certain ideologies. And yes, we have to have a better way to navigate these problems. Okay, and yeah, we're trying to work around on different way to help more physical events, to work with other NGOs that are working on civil defense. And this is what we're trying to work around is like try to learning Taiwanese through, you can learn Taiwanese and learning civil defense by like short videos like this. Yes, and this is our guest. This one for our president Washington. Yes, he's one of our guests. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for keeping time for you. I know I gave you a strict time when I was there, but I think that you did great, and I think we're going to get a lot of time to actually cover these issues in the Q&A about challenges, opportunities, and some of the more details about the work. So we will definitely get into those issues. I'm going to turn over to our next speaker. His name is Joshua Brandon. Joshua joined Spirit of America in January 2019 as part of the Middle East and Central Asia team. But since 2020, he has served as the regional director for Spirit of America's Indo-Pacific program, managing a diverse portfolio of venture-style assistance projects, including in Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Myanmar. Since 2021, he has led the organization's Whole of Society campaign in Taiwan, working closely with civil society and government partners to build programs in training civilian volunteers, improving government crisis response, and building digital resiliency. So I'll pass it over to Joshua.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Joshua Brandon. I'm the Asia Pacific Regional Director for Spirit of America. Today, I want to preface our larger conversation with a few lessons learned on civil defense, really from the civil society perspective of our last 3 years in Taiwan. First, a little bit about our organization. Spirit of America is a privately funded 501c3 nonprofit that supports U.S. national security. I think we do two things really well. One is to provide rapid targeted assistance, and this is rapid emergency assistance in conflict and disaster zones. Fortunately, the last few years have been pretty busy with us providing support not only for the pandemic, but for the Afghan evacuation and significant assistance within Ukraine. Second thing we do really well, and I think it's more appropriate to what we're doing in Taiwan, is what we call thinking a venture approach to international assistance. You can refer to it as angel investing for international affairs. We're really looking for entrepreneurs that are at the point of the problem, that have a good idea, that we can help develop, test, and then potentially scale that intervention with the ultimate idea of turning it over to large-scale government or private funding. Spirit of America in Taiwan, we've been working there for almost 3 years to the day. And I think you can boil what we do in Taiwan down to one really simple sentence. We're taking a whole society approach to resilience in Taiwan. While we've worked across government and civil society, I want to highlight 3 of our civil society partners here because I think they're probably the most appropriate for the conversation today. First is our flagship effort is with the Florida Alliance, run by Enoch Bloom, and we've trained over 18,000 civilian and first responder volunteers in skills ranging from basic crisis skills to 40-hour advanced civil defense training that includes drone piloting, operating in hostile environments, as well as shelter management, communications, etc. We're also working currently with Kuma Academy. We're supporting their training and organizing of the civilian OSINT network aimed at information resiliency within Taiwan. Lastly, but not least, obviously, is our work with Watchout, where we proudly supported their last civil defense guide and their online material. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a really incredible stuff. So the three lessons learned I really wanted to dial in on are, civil society is a catalyst for innovation. The second is understand the volunteer demand. And third, define the mission. We found over the last 3 years that civil society allows for experimentation, and it's also faster and more risk tolerant than government is designed to be. Whether it's Spirit of America or like our Taiwanese partners, we've been able to rapidly develop and test good ideas in support of like immediate needs of government and civil society. And sometimes take the shape of programs. For instance, Foreign Alliance, Spirit of America, and the National Fire Agency, a very forward-looking government agency in Taiwan, work together to design and pilot a TCERT national volunteer program. It can also take the form of technology, where we're taking rapidly needed technologies such as communication systems, drones, logistics systems, rapidly get them into the hands of government partners, civil society organizations, so they can test and integrate them into their organizations far faster than government can. Lastly, and I think this is where Spirit of America is really at an advantage, is leveraging a global civil society network, often between frontline democracies around the world. This year, we've connected our partners in Taiwan with civil society organizations in Ukraine, Australia, and numerous countries within the EU to facilitate knowledge exchange. And these are areas as simple as logistics systems, emergency response management, and again, drones. Second, I think this is incredibly important. Understand the volunteer demand. Volunteerism is incredibly variable in Taiwan and everywhere else. I often get asked, why are there not tens of thousands or millions of Taiwanese standing up to join civil society organizations and government organizations? It's really easy. They're busy. They have normal lives. People don't have the time, and civil defense is just not on the forefront of their mind every single day. So with this in mind, I recommend that organizations start to look at their structure in, having a core curriculum that's exportable. Create a cadre of instructors and volunteer instructors and leaders and have them in place. But most importantly, create the organizational architecture that will allow you to rapidly absorb a large number of volunteers and scale up your operations right before or at the point of a crisis. Create the infrastructure, they will come. Local and decentralized focus is necessary. We run surveys every 6 months. We find that the Taiwanese, much like people around the world, they care about their families and their communities in a crisis first. They're incentivized to act local. Professionally, we all know that disasters, whether they're man-made or natural, start at the local level. And so again, we recommend if the incentives and the operational requirements are at their local level, train these groups, connect with the local government, and that will allow them to take pressure off the national government and keep them focused on the local community. Lastly, there's a demand for meaningful service by women in Taiwan. 60-70% across all of our programs. The women participate at 60 to 70% of all participants across all programs. For me, I think the secret sauce of resilience in Taiwan is figuring out how to meaningfully incorporate women into civil defense that will lead to resilience. Now I'm almost out of time, and I think we can address this next one in the question period. But define the mission. Obviously Taiwan is guided by the Civil Defense Act of 2003. And again, I think we can talk about it in the questions, but this act, it does a lot and covers a lot of things from air raids to domestic violence. And if it does everything, can it do anything? And we can talk about some recommendations moving forward in how to look at civil defense from both the organization and government.
Thank you, Joshua. That's fantastic. And I think your comment about the innovative capacity of civil society is very well taken. It's not just civil defense-oriented society, civil society in Taiwan that innovates, but civil society in general in Taiwan gets so much attention for the creative ways they engage with the public. So this is clearly just an example of a larger trend. I'm going to turn to our third speaker. Her name is Fanny Chao. Fanny, she's an expert in contingency security for Taiwan, and she most recently served as an assistant analyst in the National Security Council under President Tsai Ing-wen. Prior to this role, she worked as a policy assistant in Taiwan's Legislative Yuan, concentrating on foreign affairs and defense policy. Currently, she's also a non-resident fellow at the Research Institute of Democracy, Security, and Emerging Technology, called DSET, in Taiwan. And she's a Master of Arts candidate in the Asian Studies program at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. I'm also a master's candidate in this program. So I give special welcome to Fanny, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ben, for the introduction. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the resilience policy of Taiwan government. So I'm going to talk about big picture of the resilience policy, and then I'm going to focus on the civil defense. So I think everyone here is very familiar with traditional defense concept. So it's very focused on the war fighting, very focused on the military personnel. However, in the modern world, in order to actually successfully defend the country, we really need a wider resilience within the society. So including multiple dimensions such as manpower, so how to empower them, how to utilize them, or the emerging supplies, how to prepare them, how to deliver it. So we have many different dimensions, and all the effects become the concept of the whole society defense, because it requires the cooperation of the whole society, and they work within the whole society. So this framework and this concept is developed during the Tsai Administration, so some time ago. But we see a big continuity into the administration. So actually, right after his inauguration in May, he announced that there's establishment of the Committee of Whole Society Defense. So the member of the committee consists of the representative from not just government, but the civil society, academia, and also the industries. And they're going to have a meeting in a regular basis, and they're going to provide policy suggestion to the president office. And actually, they're going to have their very first meeting tomorrow, 26th of September. So you can follow the news. And through this mechanism, they have two important functions. One is that it really endorse all diverse perspectives from civil society or from industry or from academia into the policy planning. And the second function is that because they're going to meet at a regular basis, so they're going to have a regular announcement of the current policy to the public. So it serves as a channel of society communication. The same. So the whole society defense committee really show how the importance that the government plays into this issue. And the civil defense is a very important part of it as well. So I will focus on one major problem in Taiwan's civil defense and the search of the solution to it. And I think this example will really talk a lot about the dynamic in the Taiwan's resilience policy. So a major problem I'm going to talk about is that if you follow Taiwan's civil defense closely, you will know that we have our own civil defense team, and they're not really capable of doing anything. because Taiwan is in peacetime for too long and for over 40 years. So this kind of official civil defense team had gradually become a friend association, so people go there, meet people, do karaoke instead of doing training. So this problem becomes so apparent right after the outbreak of the Ukrainian war, because at the time Taiwanese feel like, okay, the war can really happen, like we need to be trained. And I really want to get trained, but government did not provide it. Even if I join this official team, like they won't provide it as well. So that was a time like like our colleagues said, like the civil society really took responsibility and provide proper training to those who are desire to be trained. And like government moved very slow on this regard and on this stuff. And but starting from this April, the government announced that the civil defense training will be provided to the substitute military service. So substitute military service is those people who we have like mandatory military service in Taiwan, but some people they don't have to do it because they have some like health issue or some other problems. So right now they mostly serve in the governmental agency to help out their daily tasks. But in the future, they're going to have civil defense training, which include like the emergency medical training or like evacuation guidance training. And they're going to have more frequent and more intensive recall in the future as well. So by conducting this policy, government provide the civil defense training more generally, and instead of based on just like desire of individuals. So I think this example really shows that there's a supplement relations between government and civil society. So civil society move much faster, but government with public power can actually like do things in a more general term. So I don't think I have much time, but I will end this with a little thought about what think tank can talk more in the future. So I think everyone knows that right now in Taiwan resilience status quo, like we have a big gap between the status quo and ideal resilience system in Taiwan. And I hear like lots of discussion about individual flaws in Taiwan's resilience status quo. And I see so many discussion about this. And I feel that it is very hard to fix each problem individually and it's very hard to finish a puzzle without a full clear picture. So I'm thinking about how like in think tank, we have so many clear minds, and maybe if we talk more about like the ideal resilience system in the future and talk about like what Taiwan, what is the end state of the resilience, what do we imagine to look like, and that would be more efficiency to draw the clear path into that future. So I think that's all for me. So I'm taking that to.
There's gonna be a lot of questions about that. Talking a little bit about how Taiwanese government started to wake up to this issue, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think actually our final speaker, Marta Kepe, is going to be able to talk about perhaps better models of civil defense cooperation between citizen groups and the government. Marta, she's a senior defense analyst at the RAND Corporation. Her work focuses on irregular warfare, civilian-based resilience, and military capability analysis. Her recent work includes analyzing resilience and resistance in Baltic states and Ukraine, and studying allied and partner interagency capabilities and industrial power. Marta is also a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council and an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Marta, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to share here my observations from some of my work with civil defense and resilience in Baltic states and Ukraine. I'll probably talk more about Ukraine, but also touch on the Baltic states, and I'll be happy to answer questions in both of those areas later. So first, Ukraine, Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine in 2022 really highlighted the vital importance of preparedness and civil defense, and really the ability to scale civil defense capabilities when needed and maintain that surge of capability and capacity for a long time. It has shown also the many ways how civilians may contribute to an unarmed, peaceful, set of activities important for civilian protection and continuity of life in a country that is at war. The effects of ground warfare and also missile and rockets attacks have caused a lot of civilian displacement, death, infrastructure, destruction of infrastructure as well. Let me just give you a couple of numbers and data to put these things in perspective. As of March, 3.7 million Ukrainians, according to UN data, were internally displaced. Approximately 6.5 million Ukrainians were refugees abroad. And in 2024, 14.6 million Ukrainians needed at least some sort of humanitarian aid. We're talking about a country where the estimated population before the war in February 2022 was around 42 million, according to some estimates. How about fire and rescue services, emergency services? I know I have a colleague here on the panel who probably can talk about that and also probably refer to some of the work that they're doing with Ukraine. But Ukraine's fire and rescue services have been devastated by the impacts of war and also the surge in the need of their services. Hundreds of fire stations have been damaged or destroyed, both in occupied and unoccupied territories. Fire trucks are regularly destroyed, and firefighters themselves are injured, sometimes killed, or in some instances, in fact, even captured. How about medical facilities? As of August 2024, so only last month, according to some of the Ukrainian government data, 1.5 thousand medical facilities were damaged, hundreds were destroyed. Also, ambulances get caught up in the war and get worn down, destroyed, damaged, or even captured. So there's a lot of need for replacement of capacity and capability, and also skills. But at the same time, on the positive side, in Ukraine, what we see is a lot of incredible societal proactivity and generosity as well. Civilian groups, individuals, organizations have plugged the gaps where government civil defense efforts and civilian protection emergency response system was unsuccessful or flawed. They have helped their fellow citizens. A lot of volunteerism, crowdfunding, mobilization of civilian efforts was at the beginning of the war. Started out very spontaneously, was very much need-based, and relied on something that's very important, pre-existing trust relationships and informal networks at the community level. Civilian activities have ranged a wide range, really, from setting up sort of last mile distribution networks for food and medicine to those in need, to evacuating people from immediate danger, that means from occupied areas, to making drones for Ukrainian military engaging in cyber activities, open source intelligence, and also engaging in counter disinformation efforts where they use the so-called swarm of bees approach. So many individuals work to achieve a unified message. This is not a surprise. Ukraine's history of societal and political movements really helped build Ukraine a very strong and active civil society. These experiences, but also their own historic experiences in the Baltic states, have motivated them to adopt, to ensure that civil defense, emergency preparedness, and really a sort of preparedness mindset is part of comprehensive or total defense approaches in the Baltic states. The motivation for that is, of course, what they see in Ukraine, but also their own experiences with the neighboring large adversary, but also Russia's hybrid threats that they have been living with since really gaining independence. And there are a lot of hybrid threats in this toolbox, including disinformation, cyber attacks, economic measures, psychological pressure, weaponization of migration, et cetera, et cetera. So Baltic efforts, overall comprehensive security efforts, are directed not only to prepare for some sort of a conventional military attack, they really are directed to prepare for this sort of continuous hybrid threats that they have from their eastern neighbor. And they're really focusing on the aspect of resilience building from the individual level all the way to up to private enterprises, municipalities, and high-level government. Just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. We can talk, there's really a lot of efforts going on, but I wanted to highlight there is a very big focus on education, information sharing, and ensuring that there's a broad understanding of civil defense. The very basic things that you would need to do, you would need to know in case there is any kind of crisis. There is a lot of work that's being done to ensure societal unity and cohesion across ethnic and also gender lines. There are really interesting examples from Estonia, for example, how to engage with women. There's a sort of women-focused branch of the National Defense Voluntary Organization, for example. And there are examples of innovative use of technology, including, for example, emergency notification systems. And last but not least, a lot of work is being done on the resilience of energy networks that their own experience, but also the experience from Ukraine have proven that that is an incredibly important part to make sure that all the other parts of the society and the private enterprises continue to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. So you just described an example of probably more proactive intervention on the government level in the Baltic states, but also examples of civilian groups, stepping forward to plug the gaps. But in Taiwan, it seems like the environment is more characterized by citizen groups really trying to do the heavy lifting, whereas in an environment where the government has shown historically perhaps less interest than people consider them to have to. So I'm going to ask my first question. So we're here in the Q&A part, so please probably give your questions now. I'm going to just exercise my right here to ask the first question to Kuo-chun, because I know he had a lot to say and a lot of thoughts about this, which is, what is it like? What are the challenges being a civil society organization in Taiwan, feeling like you are having to do the heavy lifting, and what are the opportunities, but what are the challenges that you face?
Okay, that is a very big question. I'm trying best to answer that. Actually, the civil society in Taiwan is very prosperous, and we have tons of NGOs that are working on this civil defense issue, and some of them are working on training ability to first aids, and the Watchout we are kind of promoting the awareness and the knowledge on really online. And also there are some self-training organizations that is grassroots in the community and very self-motivated. And yes, then we have tons of NGOs doing this kind of civil defense stuff. But the problem is that the energy in the civil society is very strong, but the government don't have. So the bottom-up energy, they don't have the top-down. The government don't have the top-down policy to receive and to transfer those energy into the policies. And so it is. I think we have to see what is going to happen on this Thursday, because there's a new committee coming. But sometimes there will just be a meeting after meeting, and people say what they want to say, and then they will just send us a report. Okay, that's what people said. That's what people want, but there's no real policy coming up. Because now the government's ruling party, they don't have the majority also in the legislative yuan in Taiwan. So if they want to pass a bill or budget on this issue, it's gonna be very difficult. So yeah, civil society have to work pretty hard to make things. Yeah, well, runs better. Yeah.
So again, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. Maybe I'll just quickly add a follow-on to Fanny, and I can see Joshua might want to answer that too. But in light of this, you were in the government under Tsai Ing-wen, and you've probably been able to see how obviously the president's office has interest has changed over time. Can you talk a little bit about, how minds have changed on the government side, and do you see actually a positive future? Or is there still a lot of work to be done pressure-wise to get the right parts of government to tackle civil defense?
Well, actually, I would agree with Fanny and Kuo-chun said, there's lots of work to be done. So for example, I talk about the manpower, like the civil defense training, and merely to decide on that scope, it's been 2 years on it. So there's lots of work and resilience had to be done, and you probably will need more time to see really outcome of it. So I would say yes, there's a lot of work to be done, but also because everything has under discussion within the government from a while ago. So they're probably I would say the building stage is these years, and probably there will be a time right after the committee there will be other policy throwing out, and people were able to see it. But right now it's really yeah, still a lot of work to be done. Yeah, sorry, I'll add another thing. Another thing is that because sometimes thing is done under a small scale first, so they'll have to have time to try and error, and so that will have to add more time to it. So that's feedback to what I'm talking about all the time.
I think one of the challenges we've seen, and not in a negative sense because it's completely surmountable, is and Marta alluded to it a little bit, is developing trust and understanding. And so, 3 years ago, when we first started working in Taiwan, we looked within the government for a few of those, whether we want to call them the entrepreneurs or just some of the folks that get it. I use Director Jack Shaw of the National Fire Agency as an example. He took it, he understood that civil society could bring more to bear in terms of resources and training that he entertained within the National Fire Agency. And so he took a chance, signed an MOU with this new group, in Fort Alliance. And over the next 3 years, like I said, we had the Taiwan Civilian Emergency Response Team program pilot. We created a national tactical emergency casualty care program for the entire country. And once we demonstrated success with him, other folks, within the National Police Agency, said, well, there's something there. And so we talked about conscription and the civil defense training. We were able to, we took a risk. I talked to a police chief that said, I don't understand bottom up, but I'm willing to give it a try. And all of a sudden, we're training alternative service conscripts in use of drones and medicine that is normally going to first responders. And really, one of the programs I'm most proud of is training seniors in some of these skills as well. And they started to come out and they wanted to be trained, which I think is a great start. More definitely needs to be done. But again, I think it's a slow process, like you said, but it's about demonstrating that and educating. And then, in my opinion, it's about races from there.
Any questions? Go ahead. We'll bring your microphone, and if you just introduce yourself, that'd be wonderful.
Hi. My name is Claire. I'm also in Georgetown SFS Masters, but I'm in the Europe Studies program. I have a focus on East Asia and Eastern Europe, so I enjoyed the panelists greatly today. I previously done some work on analyzing the territorial defense forces in Ukraine and whether that can be applied to Taiwan. And I was just curious to hear from the speakers today about whether or not a government-funded initiative that is under the Ministry of Defense is something that Taiwan should consider, or if Taiwan should still mostly prioritize civil society organizations. It should be noted that Ukraine's civil defense forces only really arose after 2014, and it was initially a militia group that was later on then transformed into becoming a part of the Ministry of Defense. So since Taiwan doesn't have that, immediate, 2014 Eastern Ukraine experience, what does that look like of a government-funded or military-adjacent volunteer civil defense unit?
Sure, Marta has a lot of insight to this one.
I think probably the other panelists can actually talk more about the applicability to Taiwan situation.
Fanny, what do you think is, how reasonable is that as a possibility? The,
Actually, I would say, well, personally, I don't think like the civil society should have this burden. Like government should definitely have a role inside. But like what you mentioned, like extra funding, really, they need the legislative yuan to pass it. So it would be really hard in the political dynamic right now to pass extra funding for this. But the planning and like the small scale try and error can still like going on for now for the following 4 years. But like for the big things, we'll wait and see.
Maybe a more general comment. I think the Ukrainian territorial defense example, for example, we also have similar national defense voluntary organizations in Baltics, Nordics, many other countries, right? And we also have these you mentioned in Taiwan, but also other countries offer you, say, government civil defense organizations that are under the sort of government chain of command, where volunteers can, participate to feel like they're contributing and contribute their skills, also learn skills and become basically like a surge capacity capability. For me, as I sort of take the luxury of an analyst, so I have the luxury of time and distance to think about these things. The unifying moment here is basically provision of pathways for civilians who engage in these volunteer activities that can, and also providing a way of coordinating these volunteer activities with the activities that are done by different government or municipality organizations as well. So, these examples, Ukraine, other countries have really sort of prioritized sort of having government actors or government frameworks, a pathway as a coordination mechanism, and also to ensure that there's no, let's say, friendly fire or problems in coordination when there actually is crises.
questions? I will ask another one, and that's really more generally, if we're going to pull out to the actual needs of Taiwan in the event of let's characterize this as a full-scale invasion of Taiwan by China. What are the actual, right now, the greatest weaknesses in Taiwanese society in terms of sustaining a war effort from that civil defense perspective? Civil defense, includes making sure there's access to food and water. It's also first aid, it's disaster and fire response. And then, of course, there's an element of war fighting, but that's probably receives too much attention in the sense of what civil defense entails. So I'd be curious to ask Kuo-chun or Joshua, who's been on the ground looking at this lately. What do you think are the real gaping wounds right now that need to be addressed?
Okay, I think first. I think the biggest problem right now in Taiwan is that because the elected official, the politicians, they're kind of like afraid to use the word war. They don't want to talk about war, so they'll like paraphrase it like this disaster prevention. This is or resilience. It can be many means of anything. So they don't really raise the awareness to the public that there could be a potential war coming. So so the problem is that when we are telling people, telling the public by Watchout to say, I want you to prepare, we say there's a four preparation you need. The first one is knowledge, the second is materials, and the third one is the ability, and the fourth is psychological defense. And I think the psychological defense is one of the most important things, right? Because a lot of people in Taiwan still doesn't think it's coming. The war is coming. So if there's a real war happen, even if militarily Taiwan can win that war, but we are democratic countries. So if the mass public they say, okay, no, we want to surrender. We don't want anyone to die. We don't want any casualties. and people have like a referendum to vote, okay, I want to surrender, I want to sign this treaty under any in any conditions. Then even if we have our military preparations, even we have like civil defense preparations, but there's more than half of the population in Taiwan says, no, we don't want to defend. Then it will be useless. So yeah, those psychological defense, to have the willingness to fight for ourselves is, yeah, it's the kind of most important things in Taiwan.
Joshua, did you have any thoughts?
Sure, I alluded to this in my initial comments, but I think from my perspective on the ground working side by side with these organizations, right now the most immediate need is to really define the mission, define what civil defense means in Taiwan. I spoke to it a little bit earlier, but if you look at the 2003 Civil Defense Act, look at the skills, it's air raid intelligence, military support, anti-theft, prevention of domestic violence, order of polling stations, education. That's a pretty wide swath. And so you start to think, well, it's like I said, if civil defense does everything, it's going to do anything really well. What I have seen, I'll give the example of our partner Fort Alliance, who took sat down and said, how do we fit into the structure? How do we train our people? How do we plug in to support the government? And I'm not recommending this as a policy. This is an example that I just want to highlight from the partner. Is that they use the Geneva Convention version, which is a series of humanitarian tasks to protect the civilian population from natural and man-made disasters, and helps in recovery and creates conditions for survivability. And these skills, they outline 15 tasks that Fort Alliance has taken in, and everything from the medical training all the way to the drone training, that allows them to hyper-focus what their training and what their leadership should look like. It allows them then to go to the National Fire Agency and the National Police Agency and say, this is what we can do, this is how we can plug into your mission. And oh yes, you understand that mission as well. And I think a knock-on effect that we discovered was it's created more engagement in the international community. Because they've used this humanitarian Geneva Conventions version, it's provided a safe way for countries around the world to engage and bring expertise into Taiwan, where otherwise, I think a lot of times people think about the pointy end of civil defense, and that can scare some cooperation off in this current political climate. But by having this set definition, it's created a pathway for international engagement and very public international engagement.
Yeah, Russell, in the back.
Yeah, Russell Chao, the Global Taiwan Institute Executive Director here. Fascinating conversation, and forgive me if I missed this in the earlier conversation, but I arrived a little later. But it strikes me that, and excuse me, this is too academic-y in the question, but on the question of definitions, we just started talking about this, and I think, this will also racist, but have we defined resilience yet? It seems to me that, civil defense is about enhancing resiliency, but I haven't heard a definition yet, or I haven't found a good one. I've been thinking about it through myself also. What does it mean, essentially? And it can probably mean a lot of things, but until we're really trying to scale this, I think we need to start establishing metrics, and we need a clear definition to be able to provide those, establish those metrics to really measure, well, where are we? Where are we on that scale of preparedness, of resiliency, that we can feel, more, secure, right? So for the panelists who are working in this space as you are building capacity, how do you define sort of the resiliency and the metrics that you use to measure resiliency, if you could?
So maybe we'll go down the whole panel, and each one of you will give your definition. So why don't we start with Marta this time?
Sure. I'll be pretty quick. I do actually work on this specific question on resilience, although my personal approach is that you should not let definitions stand in the way of a good discussion and building the actual resilience, right? Sometimes we do get bogged down too much in those definitions and then don't get any further. But talking about definitions of resilience, resilience has been defined within the frameworks of NATO and the EU, so those are the definitions that I tend to use. But either way, think any good definition of resilience will talk about the ability to withstand shocks and bounce back. So they're basically based on the sort of crisis preparedness, risk management frameworks, right? Prepare, mitigate, be able to be flexible enough to withstand the shock and then recover or bounce back. Now, in sort of traditional crisis management, risk preparedness, you may have all seen those sort of circle, prepare, and bounce back, prepare. When we talk about military scenarios, wars, we may not necessarily have that circle, right? We don't know where the circle ends. When the war in Ukraine started 2 years ago, we didn't know that it was going to last at least 2 years, now 2.5 years. So there's the sort of difference in terms of maybe more traditional risk analysis. And when we talk about sort of war situations where we don't know when it will end or if it may end in sort of after a very, very long time.
Okay, so I think it is a very good and very important question. And I will say I cannot speak for government, but I'll say it would be very interesting and important to look at tomorrow's committee meeting of the whole society defense, because I feel that it's definitely one of the most important topics they're going to talk about. And according to the report that they have already sent out right now, the content will include like the manpower, and emergency supplies, energy, and medical, and all the cybersecurity. So I think like this kind of dimensions will really feed back to the real definition into the resilience. Probably it won't have like a one sentence definition about what is resilience, but it's probably going to be like what is included, and then they're going to build up within this structure.
So after Marta's definition, and now I'm a new definition of resiliency. What I would say, and I just want to add to the comments that you made. Right now, I'm working with civil society organizations and working level government agencies, yes, there is a need for a national definition of resiliency or civil defense. Because right now I see entrepreneurs that aren't waiting for that. It's the same thing of what is a whole society approach. People keep talking about the need for it. Well, it's been happening for 3 years. It's just been happening from the bottom up. And so right now I see different civil society organizations, different government, military organizations, all with a different definition. And not only a different definition of what resiliency is, but more importantly, how do they plug in and contribute to that? And so I completely agree. I think understanding what it is holistically, but more importantly, what the individual partners, how they see themselves within that, it's incredibly necessary.
Yeah, so I just follow Fanny in the Joshua. So it's like one of the big, this is a very good question, and one of the biggest problem right now is that we don't really have a very good definition of these big words we're using right now. Not only resilience, and also on civil defense. Because when we talk about civil defense in Taiwan, people, maybe a lot of people will think, oh, it's military stuff. But actually, it can be military, paramilitary, or if not military. But we don't have, when we talk and use in these words, we don't actually have a different meaning in mind. So for the government, it's like for the National Defense Department, will think, oh, because it's military, it's civil defense about military. So no civil society, we don't want civil society to work together because it's our business. I don't want you to get involved. And for some part of the department, like an interior department minister in Taiwan, and some of them were willing to help, but to work it as a non-military or paramilitary, you still have to work between the department. But even inside the administrative branch, they have different definitions. So it's just very difficult to communicate with inside the governments and government with civil societies, because it's chaotic. So, but after the new Minister of National Defense, the Kuo-chun is now minister, I think the things get a little bit better. It's Oh, this live right now, so I want to talk about this. Yeah, so I think it's gonna work differently for the Minister of Defense and the coming up whole society committee. I think that is a very good place to talk about the definition of a resilience or civil defense, because yeah, we don't have the definition before, so everyone is talking about this issue, but actually we have no ideas about what we are talking about. Yeah.
And I hope this seminar will help. It's actually the gentleman that Kuo-chun alludes to, English name Wellington, who is now the Minister of National Defense, but it was previously the Secretary General of the National Security Council and his old boss. And so hopefully that perspective, that attention from the NSC was paying to civil defense will translate to more action from the Ministry of National Defense. I think we had a question there.
My name is EJ and I'm also a student from Georgetown, first year, in Asian studies. So my question is, how has compulsory education played a role in promoting civil defense? Are there any further plan to add some programs in compulsory education system to promote civil defense in the younger generation?
Does anybody have a particular thought about that? Fanny or Kuo-chun?
I have a very short answer for that. Just the military service is mostly in ties for men for like for 1 year, and what we find out, I think it's the same as what Josh's project is about. But in the civil society, when we are promoting those civil defense issue, not online course, online materials or physical events, it's about 60 to 70% of people who attend this event it's women. So it's like maybe men think, oh, I have already done those military service for 1 year, so I don't have to learn anything new. So and the problem now is like because the military training used it back then is not that. I'm trying to find the political correct word for that. It can be better. It can be better. So is that really helpful, or it's just to make you think, oh, I've been trained, so I don't have to learn anything else. Or it's so I think a better training is still needed for promoting civil defense, or people have to find, just like women in our Taiwan civil society, they will find some materials, education material in the civil society. Yeah.
I will say that for educational side, probably people will think about like the defense education in our compulsory education, so like starting from elementary school to like the high school. So and we do have the defense education, but it do not really you do not really communicate with the current world right now. It's just like a very kind of like an old education right now, and not really with a lot of fulfilling content right now. And it is a little bit hard to reform on that because each professor teacher have their own free mind to how to like structure their education. It's not like we have a textbook and you have to follow the textbook. It's not like that. But how to improve that is, I would say it's under discussion in the environment. And yes, and then I think like what Kuo-chun said about like the extending the training, and especially to a woman's side is really important.
Also, I think you wanted to.
Yeah, some sort of more comparative comments maybe about your question about educational elements at school level. From my perspective, and looking at examples from Europe, other countries, where there are elements not just civil defense related educational elements, but maybe more broader national security, preparedness mindset, education at school level. I think that is something that can have long-term effects in terms of an actual uptake of the information that you learn, and making sure that people who have trained continue sort of actually remember the lessons, especially if there is a sort of more longer, maybe curriculum program. Latvia, for example, have introduced this national security curriculum in high schools. Now, that's a broader program, not just civil defense, but there are strong civil defense elements as well. There are elements related to disinformation, critical thinking, understanding what information are you reading, what is it that you're actually, what kind of information you're consuming. There are also lessons on how does the state work, how does the government work, so that you can make informed decisions and do your own analysis when you learn something about what's going on. I think overall, I'd say, if you ask me what is the answer to resilience building, in one word, that is education. So I like talking about the education element across all age groups, really. And I think, well, at least from these sort of Nordic Baltic examples, we do see that it can have this really good long-term effect in terms of people just knowing what to do, even if that maybe knowledge is just related to very simple civil defense elements. And also making sure that you actually reach as many people as possible already early on. So the dissemination of information to as many people as possible.
I'm gonna add one thing to that. And just from a more practical perspective, and I think this is something we're working with the Watchout. It's gonna be interesting. A lot of the government material that you're getting at, and some of it's old, it's outdated, and it's not interesting. What drew me to working with you, and I see this small, like incredibly fun to read guide that's informative, next to a massive book that's just going to look good on the shelf that's put out by the government, or and not just by Taiwan, like in many of the European governments as well. And so I think the Taiwanese government has a real opportunity here to leverage a lot of the creative voices within civil society to push out this education. People aren't coming and volunteering for these events because they're bored. They're coming because it's, you know, it's fulfilling intrinsic value, but they're getting good skills. It's fun and it's interesting. And so I think that really being one of the cornerstones is, it sounds very oversimplistic, but we found make it interesting and people can't get enough of it.
Actually, in that mind, and is there any way to get the QR code up on the, and then you guys can actually scan and see this incredible guide that they made. It is incredible. Actually, Watchout's merchandise is also amazing. My colleague Ben here is a bit of a stan for Watchout, and he's been very excited to meet you. I think we have a question there, and then we have a gentleman at the back.
Thank you. My name is Yui Akama from Secure World Foundation. My research focuses on space security for as an Okinawan. I'm researching security issues for the Okinawan government of the state. So I really like your talk to put the diplomatic security issues into the civilian issues. So having said that, I'd like to ask about how do you think about the role of local government, like Okinawan office, we always talk about the sub-national governance, like roles for the national security issues. How do you think about the local government, how we can do that, like how Okinawa, the local, regional roles for that issues.
Maybe Kuo-chun, you can have a stab at that one.
You mean local government in Taiwan, or?
Like more like local, like Okinawa, like it's not the national, like Japan and Okinawa, those things. Like how they, I would say,
It's according to the law, actually, I believe that when there's an emergency happening in Taiwan, the civil defense is the local government in Taiwan is responsible for like recruiting those civil defense team, which Fanny has mentioned before. Because those local government will be the leader of the team, the civil defense issue, and we've been slide right now, right? Okay, never mind. Okay, but we talk to some official about these issues, and this because we are thinking, is the local government, do they have the energy, or do they have the even willingness to recruit those civil defense team and to do the right thing. And what they said, what the officials says, I don't know, if there's something really happen, we'll just like have an emergency law or something, they will just take back the powers to the central government. So actually, I'm not, but we don't have a real like a drills or like a law that's really being practiced on what if something really big really happens, how central government can like command just the global government, or how local government can do those jobs by themselves. Even if some of them is already written in the law, but it's not in practice. And some of it doesn't have a law yet. But the situation right now is that it's different. It's difficult to enact or to make a new bill or laws on this issue because it will be too provoking. And yeah, so maybe we have to work around also. Yeah.
Maybe Fanny, you want to add a little bit to that?
I think that one thing I'm going to add is that civil defense is really like resilience issues really relate to like a national security. Then that is how Taiwanese people are like imagine it. So like just like we can say like for local government, they probably won't put that in their first priority, or if they don't even have the same approach, they probably don't have the same ideological like they don't really have the same direction in their policy, and probably they're thinking more about like the local issues. So yes, that would be it's not really in the they do not really in the discussion right now. They're gonna take a very active role into that, but it will be very helpful if they do.
Okay.
Okay, I always have something to say, I guess. Sorry about that. Local governments, again, I'll only do the comparative perspective. Absolutely crucial, I think, in my mind, in terms of civil defense preparedness, so-called societal defense approaches. And the examples that we're talking about here in Ukraine, Baltic states, Nordics, other countries are doing and applying this principle. The Baltic states that are really still in the throes of both building but also modernizing their resilience and comprehensive defense approach are really, I've seen the sort of initially maybe depends on the country and the region. There was, in fact, reluctance from local governments, municipalities to maybe take on more of this coordination role, responsibility role when it comes to resilience building, civil defense responsibilities, or those civil defense responsibilities are sort of more municipality related. But today we have there was a sort of determinate push, including for the government, that the plans, funding decisions, yes, they are made at the higher level government levels, but at the same, all the plans have been made with a very strong focus on decentralization. And why is that? Because when crisis happens, municipalities, local government leaders will be the ones with the networks. They will be the ones with the best knowledge about the region, the area that they're in, right? So they will be the ones that are best placed to coordinate immediate response efforts. So in the Baltics, also in the Nordics, but let's talk about the Baltics, they've really, over the last 1-2 years, they've also been very proactive about making sure that there are local government level exercises and training events. So these local government officials know what it actually means, what is their role and responsibility, how can they do their job best. And also they include locally placed businesses, business leaders, enterprises, NGOs as well in those sort of workshop type events. And local governments have also been included in more government level exercises and also military exercises as well. So definitely a strong trend towards encouraging and working together with local governments on the national security side and preparedness.
We have a question in the back. We have two. Okay, so I think we'll.
My name is Jordan. I work at the State Department in the Office of Global Women's Issues. And the panelists mentioned the importance of the meaningful inclusion of women in civil society, in civil defense, and moreover, this ambiguous term of resilience. But I digress. Can you provide some concrete examples where civil society has been really successful and effective in finding meaningful women's inclusion in civil defense? Second, what are the barriers, societal or governmental, that women face in Taiwan? And this could be more broadly in that meaningful participation. And what can governments like the United States, who have robust legislation about women, peace, and security, but when execution actually comes to pass, that is not something that is always really meaningful to our partners. So what can we do as the United States and other countries to help with that?
With need to go first. Maybe I'll make Kuo-chun answer this one because
That's a very big questions. Yeah. The first thing comes to my mind is that because for Watchout, because we have more millions of online readers that been doing our online materials, so we can see in our we can see how many the proportion of like a male and female. It's about like 55% is female, and most of them are from like 18 to 30, so younger generations. Females are more than men. So what I'm thinking is that actually because there's like half population in Taiwan, it's women, but we don't actually when there comes to like war preparations. Like I'm not so sure about Afghanistan. When I was studying like high school, if you are a boy, you study like a military training in the high school. But for female, for girls, they will study kind of like first aid. So the class is different. And of course, there's no like military service for them. But actually, women they really want to know, hey, what should we do when there's a war? But the education system and the society doesn't have enough information for them. So if there's information available, just like Watchout and also like it's for Alliance Women Academy, they also have more women participants. And there's a team called T-CERT, which is a like community emergency response team. People who join the T-CERT team is more like 60% of these women. So I think yeah, it's not like Americans should help trying to build more like more stuff, give us more budget. It's like, but I think Chinese government should do more on encouraging different part of the society to join those kind of events, because we have more potential than we thought. Yes.
how could the US help? Maybe Joshua might have a thought on that.
Sure, and this is an issue we've been thinking about very deeply lately. And I think, how can the US help? Well, I can tell you how Spirit of America can help. One thing I've noticed within Taiwan is that because there's a lack of defined avenues for service for women in Taiwan, they are creating their own. And we see this, through participation with groups in Port Alliance and with Watchout and Kuo-chun Academy. So that the demand for service is there, and they're creating these pathways. I think from what the US can do in terms of what the Spirit of America is already trying to do, is we go back to this global network of civil society organizations. And so, when I took Taiwanese civil society members to Ukraine, three of the biggest NGOs that we met with there were all women run. The instructors were primarily women. And I don't know if you want to call it modeling or, just like setting that example and creating those exchanges for that knowledge exchange to go back. On the government side, I've seen it work in other countries that we've worked in, where the Women's Peace and Security Program, connects professionals to professionals on that level. And so for me, it's really just about global civil society connection. and helping them better define those pathways.
Iris,
For the last question.
yes, thank you. Last
Thank
year.
you. Hi, my name is Iris Shaw. I'm the director of the DPP US mission. My question is two-part. The first one is to follow up on, and I appreciate Mr. Hong mentioned about the polarization or politicalization of these civil defense efforts. I just personally had that run off with the KMT legislator, Tsai Ing-wen in Philadelphia. You might or might not know in the news. And my question to her was actually ask her to clarify why she chose to politicize right before Taiwan's presidential elections about our partners like Fair America really mischaracterized Spirit of America's work as a militia, and it's kind of feed into the pre-presidential elections rhetoric from the opposition. It's about the U.S. skepticism as if the U.S. and Taiwan government are conspire to push Taiwan into war with China, I really can't imagine how Russian Taiwan Academy and Watchout, all of our great civil defense group have to deal with this kind of attacks on a daily basis. And the second question is this new whole of society of defense resilience committee is about to launch tomorrow, and based on the media report, there are like close to 70% of the non-government committee members in this committee. So I think that matched really well with the Tsai Administration's really forward-leaning whole of the government efforts to bring on the industries and private sectors for this private sector's partnership. What's your take, and maybe Martha could also shed some light on Ukraine's experience of how do we encourage this more PPP? Thank you.
Marta, do you want to start? And then we can turn to other.
I'll start with the public-private partnership question. I think, in fact, Ukraine is an interesting and very unique example. I mentioned the proactivity and the very strong civil society that we have in Ukraine and how it has been developed. It has been developing well over the last 30 years, but really even before that. And that, in fact, well, at least according to some sort of Ukrainian political analysts, you'd even see statements like, in fact, meaningful legislation decisions have only been made when they have been created or pushed by civil society. So civil society in Ukraine actually is very, very strong. And therefore there's quite a natural link, I'd say today, between civil society enterprises and government as well, particularly as the war in fact pushed them together to work more. I mean, the government and the civil society and private sector as well. And also because the war is basically like a shock element that makes you do things that maybe were slower before that. There is a very close sort of dynamic link and relationship between Ukrainian private enterprises across a number of sectors and Ukrainian government actors as well. I'd say a lot of private enterprises, private actors are driving a lot of innovation, a lot of change that's happening today, as it is, going a country of war, but also as Ukraine is thinking about how to rebuild itself. So I'd say there's the civil society and private industry is just so very, very active at the moment. And I expect that it will continue to be so. So in fact, in terms of like government, they just have to be accepted of this proactivity. And in fact, it only benefits Ukraine as a whole. I actually did have a couple of words about the sort of messaging of or whether civil defense development is polarization effect. The reason I wanted to say something is because, in fact, that is, of course, difficult to compare different countries, very different environments and political history as well. But we could see some of that in the Baltic states, especially in Latvia several years ago, where there was a little bit of there was some sort of a discussion of how to message, how to start working on societal resilience while ensuring that people do not start panicking. And also, what would Russia say, right? I think the country has moved on from that discussion since then, partly because of the war in Ukraine, partly also because the sort of discussion has really matured. And to be honest, there has never really been a very serious, strong political opposition to investment in national defense as such. Maybe more discussions about exactly how to do it. That's my 2 cents on that issue.
Fanny, you might have some experience being in government and having to tiptoe around this issue of politicization or polarization. If you have a thought, if you can.
Yes, that is an important issue that we have to think about. And it's a little bit hard to say. How to say? Yeah, it is an important issue, and it really shape how the social society communication, because first, government don't want to make people panic, and second, if you're familiar with like Taiwan's political dynamic, you'll see that like DPP government is like used to be tagged as like provocative and like starting the war, make youth people going to the war fighting battlefield, that kind of rhetoric within in the elections. You can see that this is politicalized and like being used as a political weapons. So that is also the reason why like when government and like other people, maybe mostly government, when they talk about this kind of issue, they are being very careful.
But comment, I think in terms of like the political question you mentioned, and I've seen this all over the world, whether in terms of international NGOs or the local partners. But in Taiwan, when I hear this, and I would say first, we're privately funded, so we have the luxury of being able to plug our ears and not listening to the political rhetoric, but it does affect our parts, which we care about. My initial response is, if our partners or ourselves are, being attacked, my initial response is, have we made our tent big enough? Have we reached out to every stakeholder we possibly can to educate them on what they're doing, but also understand what their needs are as well? And I think that's something we're always trying to understand and reach out. And so, again, anytime I see that, probably within a day or two, I'm trying to make an appointment with them to understand, come join our tent. I think once you see what we're doing, you're going to get excited about it.
For Watchout is that because we already know that civil defense, this kind of issue is very easy to be manipulated into like a political weapon to be like provoking to China. So we try to make our stuff. We may try to make our articles, our comics, animations to more easier, cuter for people. Different kind of people, they can all acceptable for them. So like it's just like sometimes we describe it as like, oh, this is just one kind of disaster preventions. Like because Taiwan we have typhoon, we have earthquake and different kind of natural disasters. So you will prepare for this natural disaster like typhoon, like earthquake, and you will not say, oh, you are provoking natural disaster to happen. No, you want to say that. So it's kind of we have to work around. We say, oh, you can prepare for different kind of disaster, and war is another kind of disaster. And Taiwan is just next to China. It's another kind of natural disaster. So yeah, you cannot run away from it. So yeah, so it's kind of way we try to work around and making people think
yeah, it's not political. It's just something you should do to protect yourself, protect your family. And once people started to prepare or starting to have awareness of it, and they will gradually change their mindset. But not just, it's not that political, it's for myself, it's for my own safety. If there's enough people in Thai society have this kind of mindset, then we will have a better resilience. Yes.
Well, hopefully we all know what resilience means now. Thank you all for coming. I think this is a great way to end. Thank you to our panelists, and also to, again, Taiwan Foundation for Democracy for their support today. So appreciate you all coming. Yeah. Be great.